You begin in America in your book, which we thought was interesting. Tell us about why did you start there? And tell us a little bit about this special relationship between the two countries, how you view it.
Well, it ended up being such a big part of my premiership. I mean, to be absolutely honest about it, when I came in 1997 as a fresh prime minister, we'd been 18 years in opposition. We come into power. My head was full of domestic policy, and the country was full of huge expectations. And then suddenly I found myself, after 9/11 particularly, just really fixed in foreign policy concerns and the security threat. And that was very much to do with the relationship with America. And that relationship is, some of the people in my own country didn't like the fact that I was very much shoulder to shoulder with America. But I think it's an important relationship for my country, for yours, and actually for the world.
Now, in the run-up to the intervention in Iraq, there was a lot of, frankly, probably deliberately confusing rhetoric in this country, linking, for example, Saddam Hussein to 9/11. When you heard that kind of talk, I mean, presumably you weren't making that link, were you?
No, I wasn't. I was always very, very clear about this, that the reason 9/11 impacted on the Iraq situation was not because Saddam had been responsible for 9/11. It was because the terrorism that killed 3,000 people in one day in New York, if it could have killed 30,000 or 300,000, it would have. Now, that was the thing that mattered to me. So what I then thought was that after that, the calculus of risk changed. Anybody who had anything to do with WMD had to be confronted and made to choose. You either get into line with the UN resolutions, with international, the doctrines of the international community, or we are going to take you on because of the fear of leakage from that program. So because Saddam had used chemical weapons against his own people, he'd used it in the Iran-Iraq war, because he was in breach of UN resolutions, he was the place to start. But we didn't simply look at Saddam. I mean, we looked at Libya, we looked at North Korea, we looked at Iran at the time, and we looked at the activities of the Pakistani nuclear scientist, A.Q. Khan, who had been proliferating this stuff.
Secretary of Defense Robert Gates here has said that the premise for the war was wrong, and paraphrasing him, as a result, it will always be clouded, no matter what the ultimate outcome is, and we're still seeing it play out. Would you go along with that?
Well, I mean, you've got to go along with the fact that the intelligence turned out to be at fault, and I've taken responsibility for that. What I think is also true, however, and I see this particularly out in the region now, is that the fact that Iraq has the chance to decide its own future with its own democratically elected leaders, with all the challenges, it's an interesting thing. You will meet many people out in that region who say, well, we disagree with that decision. But there aren't many people who are sorry that Saddam isn't there.
But hasn't it fed the war on terror?
I don't believe that, actually. I mean, I understand why people say that, but I think we've got to be really careful of this. Because, when people say, as a result of your decision to get rid of Saddam, we provoked this extremism, I think we just got to go back and look at the facts for a minute. We got rid of Saddam in 2 months. By mid-2003, US and British and other forces were there in Iraq with the full consent of the international community, with the United Nations backing. The UN were in Iraq with the oversight of the democratic process. When those terrorists then killed, first of all, the UN people, but then started to kill their own people, because this is Muslim-on-Muslim violence, they didn't do it because we were provoking them. And we've got to be really careful of this argument. Because in my view, one of the reasons why we're finding it hard to defeat this extremism is that a bit of our own opinion kind of comes at this from the point of view of, well, we've sort of caused this. We haven't caused it. I mean, nothing happened before 9/11 that could possibly have justified or given rise to such an attack. And I think we're deluding ourselves, actually, if we believe that this extremism is a product of our policy. It's not. It's a product of something very deep within Islam, based on a perversion of Islam, but nonetheless real and there.